I'm happy to welcome everybody to this session on violence against women and girls. In this session, we are going to talk about the future. Partly, I think we are going to talk about the convention, the Istanbul Convention, but we are also going to talk about solutions for the future in general. Before we start, I think we'll see a very short film. Then we are ready to start. We have 3 speakers here today. I'm, by the way, Ragnhild Hennum, and I'll try to keep these 3 women under some sort of control. We also have a rapporteur today. It's Randi Teil-Nielsen from Denmark, and she's taking notes for the concluding document or the concluding report from this conference. So if we have first, these speakers are going to give some short comments, and then we are going to have a discussion. And I think in the discussion it's good if we can address the draft of the concluding report or the concluding document, so that if anybody has comments on the wording, on the suggestions, then I think we should discuss this, or we should have the comments, and Randi will forward them to those who are going to take the final decision on the document. So today we have 3 speakers. It's Gudrun Jonsdottir from Iceland, who is the spokesperson for Stigamot. We have Tanja Aoin, who is the director at Exit Prostitution, Finland. And we have, at the end, Rachel Paul from Norway. She's a senior advisor at Equality and Anti-Discrimination Ombud in Norway. So I think we have agreed upon that Gudrun will start.
Okay. We are going to speak English. Good evening, dear sisters, and maybe some brothers. Nice to see you here, yes. I am not very well prepared. I'm just going to say it. Now, let's see what comes out of this. But talking about conventions, I was asked on Swedish TV yesterday about the Beijing Platform of Action and why United Nations are not going to open up the platform, and why we are doing this here at Nordic Forum, if that is some answer to the Beijing Platform of Action. And I am getting old and experienced, and I feel that my belief in laws and conventions my expectations are going down, because we have fought for all kinds of law and plans of actions. You should see all those beautiful plans of action on violence in Iceland, but they are not implemented and we don't have money for them. So I'm just going to be honest with you. My belief in those plans of actions and conventions is less than it was before. Having said that, they are extremely important. And this latest convention we have, the Istanbul Convention, seems to me to be the best and sharpest tool we have seen in the fight against violence against women, because it sets the standard. And there are all kinds of beautiful things within it, like it defines rape from consent. It makes states responsible for prevention, prosecution, and protection of women. And if the state don't prevent people, women, from violence, they can be made accountable. That is the new thing that I think might be so exciting. But if that will work, time has to show. And we got the question before we came here, how can we push the states to ratify the convention? In the Nordic, only Denmark has done it. They did it recently, and I think it's fantastic. I am a member of the Observatory on Violence within the European Women's Lobby, these big umbrella organizations for women's organization within EU. Iceland is not a member of EU, but we women find our ways. When we want to influence the world, we find our ways. So I have been there for many years. And European Women's Lobby has done a lot to influence the Istanbul Convention. And we did kind of test. We made the so-called rape barometer, where 28 countries in Europe, the women's movement within the countries, measured the reality in the countries to the minimum standard of the convention. And we looked at rape. We began by looking at the legislation and found out that in almost no country we have a legislation defining rape from consent. You always have those different aspects of violence to define something as rape. There's another aspect which is the gathering of statistics on gender-based violence, male violence against women, which is supposed to be done regularly and very correctly about very many aspects, and none of the countries are doing this. The third aspect was services to women, and the fourth aspect was access to justice, which the states don't have. So when we have measured the reality within Europe to the minimum standard of the Istanbul Convention, it's clear that a lot of work has to be done. So that is maybe, for me, the most important thing. And because of this rape barometer, the Council of Europe made an agreement with European Women's Lobby, and there was this huge action connected to 16 days of action called Act Against Rape, use the Istanbul Convention. So women's organizations all over Europe use the 16 days of action in different ways to promote the convention. And what they found out was what a huge work needs to be done. Raising consciousness, changing laws, building shelters, all kinds of things that haven't been done yet. So I realized during that process what the work needs to be done. And because of this convention, we have to do it because it has been signed. So I think it's very interesting. That's all for now.
Thank you.
Okay. Good evening. It is an honor to be here, and it's an honor to see so many people here, despite the fact that the time is 6 o'clock in the evening, or actually past 6 o'clock in the evening. And I thank especially the Shelter Secretariat for this opportunity to be here this evening. I thought I will address some questions around the European Convention. But before that, we all know that violence against women is both a cause and a consequence of discrimination, patriarchal dominance, and control. It's a social mechanism that forces women into a subordinate position. We all know that. And it allows men to exercise dominance and control over women. And we all know also that the overwhelming majority of the victims of violence, these forms of violence, are women, and the overwhelming majority of the perpetrators are men. So we do need to see that this violence is structural. And when we address this violence, we need to find strategies and methods that have a transformational process that will change the structures in our society. I just wish to go through a couple of challenges that I see today in our societies in addressing violence against women. There is a continued lack of accountability, and there is impunity for perpetrators, continuous still. I was just talking to Ragnhild just before the session started, and we were both in Åbo. Gudrun, you were there also, and I think many of you here were there maybe in Åbo. And I feel we are still discussing the same issues, and in some ways we have come a long way, but in some ways I feel that the enthusiasm is not the same, and there is something lacking. And perpetrators are still enjoying impunity. What should we do about that? And then I think we are not really addressing the root causes of violence against women, both at the individual level or the institutional level or at the structural level. And then there is also a tendency to create sort of hierarchies between different forms of violence. And that, again, I see as a huge challenge, because I think it's important to see violence against women as a continuum that women are subject to from childhood, and women and girls are subject to from childhood to old age. But I see a shift from what we used to think when we talked about violence against women. We talked about it in a holistic manner, but now there is a tendency to fragment and to segment the different forms of violence, and also to hierarchize the different forms of violence. And lastly, and most importantly, I think there is a very dangerous shift to a gender-neutral approach. Tove, this morning you mentioned that you took it up, and this tendency to shift to a gender-neutral approach in addressing violence against women is, I think, very disappointing, and also, most importantly, really dangerous. This notion of gender neutrality understands violence as a universal threat to which all persons, all people, both men, women, children, boys and girls, are potentially vulnerable to, and from which all of us then need protection. And this kind of understanding of violence against women ignores the fact that violence against women is actually a result of the pervasive inequality and discrimination that women face. It also denies the fact that the fact that we all know that violence against women is systemic, pandemic, and it's a gender-neutral approach also covers up the woman hatred or the misogyny in the different forms of violence. And it also depoliticizes and dilutes and pulverizes our feminist agenda. Our feminist agenda, which is actually a transformative agenda, which calls for structural change. And a gender-neutral approach, I really feel, crashes down all those dreams and all those visions that we have. What shall we do? Am I running out of time? Okay. And I don't... I think I disagree with you a little bit there, Gudrun, when you say that I understand, but we are all tired. I'm tired too, and I'm getting old too, and we're all getting old, and we're all getting tired. But at the same time, I do feel that this convention, especially the European Convention on Violence Against Women, it is truly progressive, and it is, in a way, it's a very strange thing, because here we are, and at least I have been working with violence against women for 30 years, and I feel sort of depressed, and I don't see how we can progress or go forward. And then there is this convention that is actually very, very progressive, and it is gender specific. It's addressing gender specificity, and it's addressing violence against women. And suddenly, we are faced with a convention that is a law or a legally binding document, which if we ratify it, it will become a legally binding document for our states. And there suddenly we are faced with a convention that is perhaps more progressive than we are now, I feel, So, and I feel we've come to a point, I understand what you're saying, but I think we've come to a point where we do need these legal measures in order to bring our states to be accountable and make our states responsible. And for the whole, notion of due diligence and making states accountable. So, I think this convention is a good thing. And this convention is also, besides being gender specific, it also addresses children. It also addresses the strengthening of NGOs, and it requires states to strengthen both financially and with all sorts of resources the work of women's organizations. So it's, I don't know, I just feel that it's fallen into our hands from the heavens, and this is something we really should take and run along with, is my opinion. I think I will, and I just want to conclude that we should not, as feminists, compromise. We should not compromise on formulating gender-neutral agreements and laws and requirements, and instead that we should not give up and we should act. And I'll stop there now.
Thank you, fellow feminists and colleagues. Nice to see you here. Nice to be here. So my name is Tanja Auvinen, and I'm the executive director at Exit Prostitution and Youth Exit. So what we do is we are not at the moment developing exit programs, as you might think when you hear the name of my organization, but we are focusing on preventive work on adolescent and children, in general on sexual abuse and violence, online, face-to-face, but especially in the context of commercial sex. So that is what we do in a nutshell at the moment, but we are hoping to get there, starting to develop also exit programs, because we don't have that in Finland yet. My points that I'm going to make this evening are more, not so much about the convention. I have a few words about that also, but they're more about, I don't know, you could say that this is sort of like motivational speech or something like that, about the future, about it has something to do with the gender neutrality that is also stated in the Nordic Forum statement draft. And I want to talk about that, and I want to talk about how I see it and what we should do about that, and sort of like look at ourselves too as a women's movement, as feminists. But I'll say something about the convention. So I think in Finland there are two opinions at the moment. I mean, the ratification, of course, is highly important, but there are people that think that, because we are also tired and getting old, as we all are, but I think we've seen this so many times happening that there is a, like Gudrun said, that there is a convention or legislation or policy action paper and no resources. So we are afraid a bit like that, when Finland ratifies a convention afterwards, I mean, now they are trying to find the resources, and in my opinion, that means that they are trying to put it somewhere in paper. Like, we don't have the money anywhere in our state budget, but they are trying to sort of like put it somewhere so they could ratify the convention. And then afterwards, I'm afraid that then sort of the discussion goes down, and then everybody's like, yeah, we're working on it, but it'll take 30 years. So, I mean, I can understand this pessimism in Finland because we've seen it so many times. But I agree that the convention is very progressive. But there is a lack, and now that I'm working, I used to work in a coalition of women's feminist associations, so I was dealing with all kinds of issues, work life, parental leave, violence against women, all this. And now I'm focusing on prostitution. So convention and prostitution, not really so progressive. I mean, when you read that, you can clearly see that it's such a converse issue that they couldn't come up with a solution, and that I think that's really big thing, that in that kind of progressive convention you can still not say that prostitution is a form of violence against women. So that's a huge minus. And I attended the seminar last fall, and I asked about it. There was some person from the very body who was drafting convention and going through the negotiations, and I was asking about it, and she was really vague about it, and I could see like her whole answer and her whole appearances sort of told you that this is so like, let's not go there, let's not talk about this, let's just focus on the other things. So for me personally, that is a big minus. And especially when, Rachel, you were saying that, talking about the continuum, like how this violence against women, violence against an individual woman is often like a continuum from childhood, and it goes on and in different forms. Well, that is what is happening in prostitution, There are so many women that end up in prostitution that has been through sexual abuse when they were children, harassment when they were teenagers, online abuse, ending up in prostitution at some point of their lives. What else, like after that, who knows? But I mean, it's a form of violence, and we know that, and it's so clear, but not clear in the convention. But I love to be here in the Nordic Forum because we can so openly talk about this, and I can say like a million times a day that it's a form of violence, because we can't say that in Finland. So it's really lovely and refreshing to be here. So, but about my like sort of motivation speech, I was thinking about the future, and I see like there are demands and strategies, and they are on two levels. So the first is the concrete steps and actions, and that is what we are talking about when we are talking about the convention and what is happening next. I mean, we need the resources, and we need the budget allocations, we need the services, we need the right people working on right places, and we need commitment, and that all comes to resources, that all comes to plain money. But then we also need the mental and cultural change. And, as I said, I've been working on these issues for 15 years now. And I used to think that, the first comes first, that we first need the resources, we first need the concrete steps and actions, because I couldn't really get a grip on that mental and cultural change. Like, I was like, that's going to happen when all this is in place, in 30 years or something. But I don't know anymore. I don't know now, because is it really ever going to happen? Like, I don't see the money anywhere. And despite the economical situation, it's always like, yeah, sure, like, we just have to, like, now it's bad times, and now it's whatever, and, there's huge problems with the state budget and so on. So I think, like, in this, yes, I'm tired sometimes, but I'm not pessimistic. I think we have so great tools, great means to do something about it, like ourselves. We have all the, all the technology, we have the social networks, we have networking opportunities, we have, like, the world is in our hands, so to say. So I think there are chances for us to do. But so, what is mental and cultural change? What is that about? I think it's about words. I mean, first, let's say it's like couple counseling. I mean, what is the easiest thing to do? It's not to change your partner, it's to change yourself. And that's what I mean when I think that we have to look at ourselves too. Like, if the government is the stubborn partner, and in real life I would say ditch it, but because governments are actually our partners in life for real, like nobody no humans are. So we have to find another way. And then we have to have the strategy, or we have to think about this, and we have to look at ourselves too. And it's about word. It's about using the right language. And that's, like, when Rachel, you brought up the question of gender neutrality about the text, and that is also stated in the statement draft of the Nordic Forum. I think it's so important. But you know what? We are also doing it ourselves. Because, when they start to do it, our government starts to do it, our ministry starts to do it, we sort of, we play their games. Because, we want to be heard. So when you're somewhere sitting and asking questions, you sort of think that, okay, I'm using their language so they can hear me, and they will understand what I'm saying, or, maybe it's just that I want to be polite. And I don't think that's the way. I think that we have to really, say the words. We have to talk about violence against women. We have to talk about that prostitution is a form of violence against women. We have to focus on the perpetrators. We have to say that the perpetrators are perpetrators. That's really important. We have to put the gender first. And when we talk about these things, we have to talk about gender, power, and patriarchal societies. It's called the world, so it's nothing new. And we have to speak up, like in conferences, in seminars, ask the stupid questions, ask the difficult questions. Sometimes we are so damn polite, and I think that we have to also look at ourselves, look at in the mirror when we are talking about gender neutrality. And I know, now that I'm working with prostitution and commercial sex and, sexual violence, I've been in those seminars where I'm asking questions. This is like my thing, that I always ask a question, some question. I always have a question in mind, so I ask it. And now, it didn't happen before, but now I can see that, my question is so many times it's unanswered. When you're in a panel and you take up questions, and there are many questions. Of course, you cannot always answer them all, and you have to pick your questions as a panelist. But when I'm in the audience and I'm asking questions about, for example, prostitution and some difficult cases or violence against women, but prostitution, it's like I'm seldom answered. It's so weird, and it's such a new thing for me. So I can see how difficult it is, and how important it is to ask the questions, to use the words, to demand for the answer. So being courageous, really, that's what we have to do. And then asking and telling. In my work, when we work with young people and they tell us something about their experience, some harassment situation somewhere, and it might even not be so severe, but for 12 years old, somebody's grabbing her in a bus stop, it feels like the end of the world. And then they're like keeping it inside for 4 months or 6 months, maybe a year. And then when they first tell about it, and then like the amazing thing happens that then in 2 weeks they told us about it, and then we sort of like go from there. And in 2 weeks they've told 4 people, and even if the perpetrator is never caught or anything like that, it's such a relief for the person. So like asking and telling is so important. So about language, about talking, I just think we have to think about it so much. And we have a great community here. We have great feminists. There's so much we can do together. There's so many people we can rely on. So I don't know. I just want to say that, as they say it, we can do it. Yes?
Yeah. Thank you. I think I'll open for some short comments in between the panelists, and then we'll have questions from the audience.
Okay. Rachel. We do agree. I am not tired in this fight.
Yeah.
It's just, when I say that I'm getting old and experienced, it means that I have, let's take, for instance, the law that criminalizing the buying of women. Yeah. We pressed the law through Parliament. Mm-hmm. We pressed it through a massive demonstrations, all kind of pressure. We got the law and we drank our champagne, but nothing changed, nothing at all. And on moments like that, I think it doesn't matter what kind of law we have, If there isn't the will, Tove. It doesn't matter how much champagne we drink. No, that's what I said. No matter what kind of law we have, if there isn't any will, if the police is not, if we have this huge resistance, the reality of our women at Stígamót, it's so far from all that. And as I hope you understood what I said when I said this convention really sets a standard that no nation in Europe can live up to, which means that it pressurizes all the states of Europe to do work that they haven't done before, and therefore this is heaven. I totally agree with you. I'm not tired. I'm tired today. I'm not tired of the fight. It's just this reality that is getting complicated. And talking about gender-neutral language, because in Stígamót where I work, we are working with incest. We are working with incest, rape, prostitution, and pornography. Last year, 18% of those who came to seek help were men. They were 25% of those who were the incest cases and 10% of what they defined as rape. So the world is not black and white. Sometimes I feel that I'm losing the grip because things aren't as simple as I would like them to be, as I thought they were when I was young. That's what I'm trying to say. It doesn't mean that we shouldn't have this convention. I think it sounds fantastic. There's one thing I don't understand in it, and I was hoping that the moderator could answer. We could turn to you, because this due diligence thing, I have never quite understood it.
What?
And the due diligence, the responsibility of states for implementing the law. Because this Istanbul Convention, what is new in it, is that women can make states responsible. And I know that women around Europe are claiming their rights, and they are reporting states for not preventing them. If the state don't prevent me from violence, I can sue the state, but I don't know exactly how it works. If this works, it's a new and fantastic tool. And sometimes I think that last year we were dealing with at least 150 rape cases in Stígamót. In my micro community, remember, we are very few, but still we had all those rapes. And I thought that maybe we should, if all the women collectively reported Iceland for not bringing about justice, we need something like that. But I don't know how it works.
Actually, Norway has...
Can you answer, please?
Yeah, I think
Do you
actually,
have a simple answer?
I think actually Norway has been convicted twice for breaking the European Convention on Human Rights for exactly the same reason. So I think actually that part is already covered in a way, but it may be easier and easier accessible in the Istanbul Convention. But I think it's an opening, at least for severe cases, when the state almost say we are doing nothing, then they will be convicted for breaking the Human Rights Convention, the European
But
Convention.
it's the same kind of that we have in CEDAW Convention. It's the individual complaint, so that's the same kind of tool in the Istanbul Convention, right?
Yeah, but it's a bit different because the European Court of Human Rights, it's an institution where you can bring in individual cases. So it's different, but still the mechanisms are quite the same. They look like they are the same, but it's some differences.
Yeah. Okay.
Some more comments?
I understand what you're saying, Gudrun, but I still think that laws do, and I agree with you. But at the same time, I think it is important. We want rule of law.
Yeah,
we live in societies where we want the law to be, we want to be ruled by law. And we want to formulate laws that are good for us, that set our standards, and so I think I agree that having laws is not enough. We need to have them implemented, and that's where the due diligence aspect comes in. Yeah. Because then laws and conventions, they bind governments to implement these laws. And of course, most of our governments sign conventions and they do nothing about it afterwards. And then the law is sitting on a shelf. But then, on the other hand, it's our job perhaps to keep pushing, and we must agree that this law criminalizing the buying of sex, okay, nothing perhaps is happening on the ground, not very much at least, but I think it does give us a feeling of, confidence.
That's not what I mean.
And achievement. Yes, I understand.
Yeah.
So therefore the law is important.
Yeah.
That's what I want to say. And about the gender neutrality, I understand this whole thing about, of course, I am by no means denying that both men and boys can be subject to rape and incest and different forms of violence. I'm sorry, I just forgot to put it on silent. But I believe that is again anchored in patriarchal power and dominance and control, and it is anchored in and founded in patriarchal power and privilege. And again there, most of the perpetrators, even recent studies show, are men. And also among young people, when there is violence among very young or teenagers, most of the perpetrators are boys. So it has to do with the male patriarchal culture, which we want to transform. And I wanted to say one more thing about the continuum of violence, because the continuum of violence that I was talking about is that women and girls are subject to violence from birth to old age, but also the continuum of violence helps us understand that violence against women takes place from the home, in other areas in society, and also transnationally. Like say rape in war. And sometimes there is talking about hierarchies of violence. Sometimes it's easier for our governments and our societies to say that what's happening there in those countries, rape in war or rape in developing countries, is is horrible, and then therefore we have to confront that, which is very important. But it is equally important to address the everyday warfares in our homes between men and women, between boys and girls. And it's very easy to forget that and ignore it or not give it equal importance. And all this is linked, and they flow into each other, and they hold up each other. And in the end, what are we holding up? Male dominance and patriarchy. So, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Tanya, do you have some comments? Or?
I think I'm fine at this moment. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think
Shall we take
Tove put up her hand.
Because there were some hands.
Take some questions or comments or.
I'm also so tired. As Ragnhild said something earlier this morning, she was in Åbo 20 years ago, where we had a kind of other discussion when it's come to rights. She can't hear this today, legal rights. Maybe the most of the country have the legal rights now. And as long as we are pressing up, there is some politicians who have heard us. But it takes such a lot of time and work to get from we identify a problem till we find the solutions. And I agree with you, this Istanbul Convention is very, very important. And I think as an NGO, we should use those conventions often. And for those women who should take up to the EMK, European Human Rights Convention, it costs so much for those women to get a case up there. Norway was convicted last year for not giving safety and support for a woman with 4 children. It's the first time in this case we can find where Norway is, the best country to live in, and they didn't get enough support. So I think sometimes I'm quite fed up myself, so therefore you young women sitting here, liksom, oh God, there is someone coming after us. Let's drink champagne for that. So it's pleased me a lot to see young people working with this issue. And in many countries, I think they have laws, but as I said earlier this morning, to get it down on the floor, and that the social workers, police are using those laws. Because when Norway was convicted, the statsadvokaten, he sent a letter to the police and said, you shall. But the police don't do it. I talked to a woman 14 days ago. She had reported 50 times. He had broken the restricting orders. She had moved 3 times. And when the police they might be fed up with her, but she needed protection. Of course. So many women are this experience that when they get restricting orders, nothing happens. He calls, he breaks it, nothing happens. And why? And maybe there was a woman from Drammen who came to the police, and she was going to report, you have to come back tomorrow. They never talked to the man, and some days after, he killed her. So now it's a new case that Norway didn't give enough, the state didn't give enough support. Because if we complain to the CEDAW, as we can, and we are writing shadow reports, it says when it's come back to the state in Norway, the CEDAW is very concerned, and then Norway have to write to CEDAW to tell what they have done. And case closed. Have they done it? Yeah. And Norway was, CEDAW complained for Norway 12 years ago about, we are very concerned that so many of the reported rape cases are closed. What happened? Nothing. So the resistance, I don't know why. 2 years ago, Norway used 21 million to work for people to stop smoking. Can you imagine if someone gave me 21 million so I could work with this issue? Of course, I didn't stop smoking, I didn't stop drinking, I didn't stop anything, so that was waste of money. But could you imagine if they gave us so many millions to prevent violence? There is something, but I don't know. So I was so excited to come to this side event because, maybe someone have the solution. Then I should. Yeah.
Can I comment?
Yeah, or can we take a few more questions? Is it okay? Yeah. Now one there, and I have one question there, and two questions on the front row here.
Hi, my name is Hannah. I come from both UN Women Sweden and the World Association of Girl Guides and Girl Scouts, and I can tell you I'm everything but tired.
Right.
And
That's good.
And in a way, it hurts me to hear you say you're tired, because I think I may be speaking on behalf of many young women, saying that that's the last thing that is encouraging us to hear that you are tired. On the other hand, we would like to have all your experience and all your good thoughts to create those damn strategies and ideas and ways to make this work. Because, I mean, we have all the means to drag it into, to drag the issue into visibility, which on the side event that I was at this morning was being said, like, you know, there's too many people sitting in the shadow. Why are there rows empty here? We should all be sitting up front. And we have the technical tools, we have the knowledge, we have the experience to make the issue visible and thereby no longer to be ignored by the government. Because I think it is about ignorance and it is about being content. At least in the Nordic countries, we're quite pleased. You know, a little bit of sexual violence, you know, but I'm living a comfortable life. I think that is the biggest issue, is that most people are quite happy. We need to be more angry, we need to be more on our toes, and we need to tell them even more that no, we do not accept this and we want equal rights for everyone. And I'm lacking that rights-based approach, talking about this is not, you know, something nice that we do alongside because we have nothing else to do. It is because it is discrimination, and it is something that we have the right to have. You know, be a bit more angry. and make it a visible issue in your countries. And take that energy with you, the opportunity of being here and using it, please. And therefore, I'd like to turn towards, okay, but the document as such may not be strong enough. We may need to work on the language to make it more demanding towards the governments, to show that we're not only talking sexual violence, we're also talking emotional, economic violence. Discrimination in general is violence per definition, which is something I think that governments do not acknowledge enough. That kind of, you know, get some action going. Sorry, I just had the need of sharing this.
Great.
Thank you.
No, sorry.
So,
Something else, or do you want?
No, there was some.
I have two other comments. Shall we take them also? Randi, there.
Thank you. My name is Randi. I'm from Denmark, and I am actually very a little bit proud, but also very, very pleased with the Danish ratification of the Istanbul Convention.
Yeah.
So, and we have been fighting for that for years in the Danish Observatory on Violence Against Women. We have talked to politicians, members of parliament, been in the Committee for Equal Rights in the parliament, and maybe, I'm not quite sure, but maybe they really don't understand what level they have to live up to now. As you said, I think, Gudrun, it was non-European countries could live up to this standard. And of course the Danish, it's the same in Denmark, or for Denmark. But I don't know, maybe they don't know how fantastic this convention is. But that's not a problem now. The important thing is to make governments ratify. When we visited the Danish Equal Rights Committee in Parliament, they had two questions. The first one was, does it cost anything if we do this? The second question was, do we then have to change the way we teach our children in school? And I really hope it will. But we could just say, well, maybe, we don't know, we hope so. Does it cost anything? Well, it's not us to answer that question. And then after 1.5 years, they did ratify in June this, no, not this year, a couple of months ago. They made one reservation, actually. But then I would like to ask you, what does your government tell you when you go for ratification, when you demand ratification? What do they say? What kind of arguments do they use for not being willing to ratify? Because the Danish government actually compared to Sweden and say, well, we are, in Sweden they haven't done it either, as if it was an argument for us. So what do they tell you when you ask them to ratify? That was just a question. Then I have a comment, maybe a little bit like you. I am not young, but I'm not so tired. I'm very, very angry. Not with you, but with society. So I think we should think a little bit about the women's movement in 40, 30 years ago. A strong women's movement in the Scandinavian countries and many other countries, and they couldn't use an argument about resources because they were not used to have a lot of public resources. Actually, the women's movement didn't have money to do anything, but they did it anyway. So I completely agree that there is a lack of funding for all the things we want to do. But I also think that it's so important that we don't only speak about funding, have funding as our first demand. As I think it was in the document, unfortunately the first demand in the last chapter was more funding. Now it has been changed, so it's much better now. But I think funding is important, and I come myself from a women's organization, but it's not number one on the agenda. Number one must be to demand change of our societies, political demands. So that's just what I would like to say.
Yeah. Then we'll take the last comment for now. No? Okay. Then the panel will be. Then you can comment. Yeah. Yep.
Shall I start?
No. We'll. They can have some comments,
Okay.
Or do you want the?
Doesn't matter.
One question. Okay. Come on.
Yeah. Hello. My name is Kelvin. I'm from Sweden. I'm a Nigerian. I heard what you guys are saying, and I quite agree with you all. But from my own perspective as a man, I think the main issue is the attitude of the men towards women. And that should be the focus. I mean, how do they get proper education? How do they get a proper understanding that this thing they are doing is not good? And why are they doing it? What are the consequences? I think this is a priority issue I think that the men should be aware of. Because if they are aware of what they are doing, I think they will stop it. I mean, I don't think the finance is the problem because this is EU. I mean, money to finance that is not a problem. But changing the attitude in men is a priority. Thank you all.
I feel the need to express myself again because and I love that you are angry, young woman, and that you tell us to do our work. I love it because without it we will not get anywhere. And I'm not tired of the fighting. I'm just tired today. What I was maybe trying. A wise person once said that when you come to a new country and you have stayed there for a week, you can write a whole book about the country. If you stay there for a month, you can write one chapter. If you stay in this new country for a year, you can just write the preface. That's maybe where I am now, because I have been around for 30 years and I have so often thought that I found the solution. I have this urge to know how to stop violence. And whenever I thought I had the solution, something else came up. The laws, the raising of consciousness, the funding, all those aspects, it is so complicated. That is so frustrating, that there are no simple solutions. That's what I'm trying to say about the Istanbul Convention. I think it is fantastic. I have never ever thought that we shouldn't have law in place. Of course we should. There are just so many aspects. It's so, yeah. But please be angry with us. Without that, we will not get anywhere. I really mean it. And you asked from Denmark about what our government say. That is also part of, maybe I am changing because in the beginning I pressed my government. I met with the Minister of Minister of Social Affairs and Minister of Justice, and I really pressed them to ratify. And after this process with the European women's movement in all those countries and reading the report of what women did, I am now pleased that the Icelandic government hasn't ratified yet, because if they had done it, they wouldn't have done their homework. If you mean something by ratifying the Istanbul Convention, you have to change law, you have to have all kinds of services, and you have to do justice. So now I would rather prefer that they take their time and do their homework, instead of saying, "Way, we ratified it." As Turkey was the first country to ratify the Istanbul Convention. They haven't done a thing. It doesn't mean anything. So I want them to do a real work. Thank you.
Yeah, for the Finnish government, I think it's the same. They want to do their homework, and that's what I've heard last, that they are just going through it, and it'll take time because they are trying to figure out how to present the situation in a way that they can really ratify it and be sort of okay about it. I had some ideas about just, when we were preparing for this event, and then there was this question that how do you push your governments to ratify and, for this convention? And like my brain was totally empty and I had no idea. I was like, what do you do? Like usually, like how do you do that? But actually now that you said about the like CEDAW convention and the other conventions, I think actually they are really good tools. Like that's what they are. So after that's also a lot about the monitoring. So like when the convention is enforced and implemented, and then how they are going to monitor it. Because like with CEDAW convention, I have been really pleased, and I think it's a great tool for the Finnish NGOs, like how the CEDAW committee is reading all the shadow reports, giving their recommendations based on those shadow reports. You can see a lot of stuff that is going straight from the NGOs to the report. And then, but what we are not doing, I think, sufficient enough in NGOs that we have to use those tools. Like it's like football, you know. There's like maybe there's some trick that you have to learn with with the ball and your foot, and you have to do that 10,000 times before you're good. So I mean, it's the same thing with the message. You have to say it, I don't know how many thousand times, but you have to repeat it and repeat it and repeat it. So with all these conventions and their monitoring systems and the recommendations, you just have to put it down and make it heard so many times that they actually hear it. And then, but that might take some years, 20 years, whatever. But and I think that's also that we have to really be strict on. So I am hoping that this convention actually is going to be a really good tool because of that. But we'll see how it works.
Shall I say
If you have some comments,
yeah,
please.
First of all, I want to say a huge thank you to you and for that correction. And it's actually inspiring because now it is important that young people tell us that it is important that we don't give up and that we work on this together. And it is important to be angry together. So thank you for that inspiration. I wanted to address one more thing, and that is something that you also mentioned earlier today, Tove, the enormous resistance we meet when working and addressing violence against women. And why is that? Why do we meet this resistance constantly? And I think it has a little bit to do with ourselves and our own resistance or refusal to really confront what this really is. Because violence against women, a large number of forms of violence against women happens in the intimate sphere. It happens between people who are supposed to love each other and care each other. It happens in relationships where we are tied to each other emotionally, where we have loyalties. A lot of domestic violence is the perpetrators are fathers, brothers, husbands, lovers, boyfriends. And then there is, I think it has something to do with that it's an extreme way of saying it, but we are sleeping with the enemy. And then it's difficult to really confront it and fight against it. So I think some of this resistance comes from within ourselves. Because once we confront it, we have to do something about it, and we have to act. So that's just a comment I wanted to make. And another problem that I feel is, and there again you have been an inspiration, or it's been good to hear the angry voice, because I have felt that we have, at least in the Nordic countries, come to this situation where we consider there is this notion of having achieved equality, and that we are all equal. So what do we need to fight for? So that also is a challenge. And to answer your question, at least in Norway, it is interesting that Denmark is the only Nordic country that has ratified this convention. And as you say, it could be because they really don't know what they have done. But then, on the other hand, they have ratified it, and now you have a tool which you can use against them. Because this convention also requires, calls for, is first of all anchored in rights. It's a rights-based convention. And it calls for also minorities, the rights of immigrant women, asylum seekers, and that they are immigrants or asylum seekers shall not be used as a grounds for discriminating against them in providing services. So actually, if our governments really sign this, we really can, at least we have an opening here to really ask them to then comply with the convention. But of course, it is a hopeful thing, but still, it's something to work with. And like you said, Tanya, it is a tool.
Yeah, it is a tool.
And it's up to us to use it or not. That's what I want to say for now.
Then Tanya had one comment, and then we'll have a question from behind there.
Yeah, I had a comment on the the men's attitude, and also, which was good that you brought it up, and then that's sort of connected to the speaking up. I think about all those, also what I was referring in my speech, like that we have to. I've heard some really interesting presentations here on these 2 days, and the other was about bystanding. So it was this bystander approach, and that is something that we might all do in different situations, whether it was about something about violence happening somewhere, in our home, neighborhood, family relations, or whatever, or then on street, or then also in the structural level, in the government level, if government is doing something or not doing. So I think we have to get rid of that attitude, the bystander attitude, and really to learn how to speak up. And I mean, we are NGOs, we do that all the time, but really demand more actions from ourselves too. So I just wanted to point out that again.
Okay. And then we had a question.
Thank you. Is it on? Is it on? Yeah. Of course, you had a lot of questions on the last when we asked questions, and I understand that you might not have time to or remember them all. But I really think that you missed to answer my fellow Swede here and his friends. And his question, oh my God, about the perspective of the males. Mm-hmm. And if you would like to comment, I'm writing for Nordic Forum's website, and it would be really great if you could comment it, because I feel that the atmosphere and the perspective for this entire seminar has been very much about how we can help women who are already victims of this, instead of perhaps lifting the perspective of how we can prevent it. And if you feel that this should be put into the convention, since we're already discussing it, and saying what we like in it and not. So if you would comment that would be great. All of you.
I didn't get the question.
Did you hear? You didn't get the question?
Could you?
I think she reminded us about this man's question, or him addressing that this is to prevent violence against women. We have to address men.
Men and men's attitude, right? Men's attitude, yeah. I mean, that's, and I sort of tried to comment on that just before, because, that's the bystanders approach, that I'm really interested in because, when we think about, of course, there is a victim and there is a perpetrators, and we are dealing with all that, and we have the services, or we might not have the services, but we sort of know what to do, and if we have the resources and this and that. But then there is this cultural attitude, and this, it's about change, and it's about transformation, and that's the bystanders. That means that, there are so many percentages of men and women that are not victims, or that are not perpetrators, but are we are silent about stuff. So I don't have any specific solution for that, other than we just have to keep on talking about this, and then addressing and using the right wording also. But I'll just think about it more, and I'll come back to it. But yeah, if you have something.
Are we talking about prevention?
Yeah.
Yeah. Setting normative standards, I think, are also preventative in the long run. And actually all that we have been saying here has to do with prevention, with how at least I think the only way to prevent or to really eradicate violence against women is by bringing about huge structural transformative changes in our societies, in the way we think, in the way we work, in the way we bring up children, in absolutely everything, which is grounded in patriarchy. So from a radical feminist point of view, that's the only way I believe we can really prevent violence against women, is by addressing the real root causes, and the real root cause of violence against women is patriarchy and patriarchal notions of men and women, and stereotyping roles of men and women.
Do you want some more comments? Or we have a question down there, or a small comment? Oh, you have a question also? Oh, yeah, fine.
Yes, she had.
Okay, fine. Then it's you, and then it's Lena afterwards. Yes, please.
Well, I was wondering, you were telling us to be brave and to dare to talk about gender and about power. And you were also talking about this being gender specific. But still, you are addressing the problem as violence against women and not men's violence against women. How come?
I used to say men's violence against women, and I used to emphasize the role of the perpetrators. That's what I talked about in plenary session yesterday. That's what I always talk about. And I have talked a lot about preventive work based on shaming and blaming the victims of violence, which are the women, instead of raising men and boys to respect women. I think that preventive work should be aimed at boys and men, and it should be done in a positive way, bringing out the best in them and teaching them respect. It's as simple as that. Although I agree with the nice words Rachel, my dear friend, used about structural change, in practical words it means this. To make it simple, preventive work should be aimed at men and boys, and I think men are important to take part in that work. Therefore, we hired a man in my organization recently to talk to other men about violence, because I think their hearing might improve if a man talks to them. And that's also an answer to what you asked about.
I think we'll take one comment from Tanya, and then Lena can.
Yeah, thank you. It's a really good comment. I mean, I think like violence against women, for me, it's so radical, because in Finland we don't like. It's been, there's been a shift. Well, not really, but there's been a shift in the public discussion from when I started working on these issues. People talked about violence against women, but then it's like violence in near relationships and family violence and whatever, it's been blurred to something totally different, and now we have to fight to get violence against women back on the map, on the agenda. And then you're right, there should be the men's violence against women too, but it's a good reminder. That thanks. About the preventive work that it's sort of linked to it is linked to the gender neutrality in a way that, because in my organization we are doing school visits, so we go and speak to the 8th graders, boys and girls together, and they're really good conversation. We talk about sexual harassment and abuse and prostitution and issues like this. And they are old already. They are 14 years old, 15 years old, but still, I mean, they are young, and I love those school visits. But then again, like this Finnish school system, for example, it's really like it's so gender neutral that you can't, like the language and everything. It's so like. I mean, it's so weird because it's hidden. The structures, the really gendered structures in the school system are so hidden, and they are there, and they are so strong. But then on the language level, it's really neutral. So, I don't know how they can talk about anything there in those schools, because it's so blurry and it's so vague. And but I think it starts. I mean, we would have to have that. This education in daycare centers. I mean, we should start that at 2 years. No, really, when the kids are 2 years old, we should start and talk to them about this stuff. Like, how do you talk to 2 years old about this stuff? And then when they grow up, and every year you just develop. But yeah.
So, should we take the last question?
My name is Lena. I'm a colleague with Rachel, and I wonder.
Can you? I can't. For some reason, I'm not hearing.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Now, yes.
It's scary to talk that loud, but the question that you asked as well about how to prevent, and that we need more strategies to prevent. We can use the Istanbul Convention to hold our governments responsible, because they are really reluctant to do things like you have done here, the macho fabric, learning boys, new norms, etc. But I also think that it's people working with violence are very scared about the thing that men do not. There are men that do not like that women get empowered, and they get very angry when women have education, come to political positions, etc. I think that we need to talk about these men, and we do that in a certain theoretical level, but how do you think we can address these issues about loss of entitlements and privilege in concrete actions?
Are there any further questions?
Yeah, thanks for that.
Okay, shall we take, if there are no further questions, we'll take a last comment here, and then you'll be allowed to give a comment, okay?
I had an answer to...
Yeah, but just 1 second, and you'll be allowed.
With regards to that, I think non-formal education is one very important key to use in regards of capacity building for boys and girls. And there is a particularly good program called Voices Against Violence, which has been started by the World Association of Girl Guides and Girl Scouts and is implemented in 164 countries in the world as we speak. And one perfect example from that comes for some as maybe a surprise from Rwanda, where I was at a study visit last year, where they are working with the campaign in that particular program and have reached immense results in the age group of 8 to 14-year-olds. So Voices Against Violence, for those of you who haven't had a look at it, is a really good non-formal educational program that works for both boys and girls. That was my comment.
Thank you. No. What?
Or comment. Tanya, I'm so pleased that we're talking about the future. And I might be a pessimist today. Most of the time I'm not. Because 116 years ago, there was an international conference on slavery against women, because women was trafficked in the prostitution. 100 years ago in Norway, they made a group, the National Committee Against White Slavery. They were talking about the future. In 2005, we started the Rosa project because we were talking about the future for the next generation of women who was trafficked. So I'm so pleased we still talk about the future.
Then you can comment.
Now I've forgotten where I wanted to start. But your question about gender specificity, and yes, I agree with you. Violence against women does not make visible the term violence against women does not make visible the perpetrators. Yeah. But I still think that it is a little problematic to say men's violence against women, because a number of the forms of violence against women are sometimes perpetrated by other women, but within a patriarchal structure. For example, in larger families, or not in individual-based societies like Norway and the Nordic countries, but in, for example, India, where I originally come from, a number of daughters-in-law are killed not by their husbands or by their fathers or brothers, but by their mothers-in-law. But it is still violence against women. And it is gender-based violence, and it is, how can I say it? It's patriarchal violence against women. Perhaps.
Or male violence.
Or male, in English, you can say male violence, and that's a little bit more abstract, and then it's possible. But if you say men's violence against women, at least I have met with problems in India, for example. And also female genital mutilation. It's only girls and women who get genitally mutilized in that manner. And all the mutilation is done by women. The concrete mutilating that is taking place is being conducted by women. But still, we all know that it is male violence. It is the community and the community's patriarchal norms and male dominance and the control, the need for male control over female sexuality that does this. So that's the comment I want to make there. Then to this very difficult question that Lena came with, I must say I really don't have an answer except that I think in Sweden you are, I think, much more clever in doing these concrete projects like you mentioned, Lena. In Norway, I don't know of any, actually. I don't know if you do, Ragnhild, addressing male attitudes. But that is something that needs to be addressed, and we really need to talk about it, and we really need to acknowledge that that is one of the fundamental grounds for the fact that so many women are being subject to violence. And a large number of women, compared to the population of Norway, are killed in families in Norway. And
in Norway, in India?
No, in Norway. Norway has a large number of... Relatively.
I didn't hear you right. It's okay.
Relatively, compared to the very, very low rate of killing in Norway. A large number of them
and
are...
this is an issue, and the CEDAW committee took it up with Norway. Yeah. So, and why does that happen in Norway, which is otherwise supposedly gender equal? And it is because we are not really doing serious work in addressing male attitudes and men's attitudes, and this whole patriarchal notion of privilege and privilege to women, access to women, like in prostitution, that it's men take it for granted that that they shall have access to women's bodies. And you're brought up like that with that notion, and it is very difficult to address it. And I think another problem I feel exists in this space that you're talking about, Lena, about addressing men and male notions, is that I feel that every time we take one step forward, then that rhetoric is taken away by the establishment, by patriarchal norms, and it carries on and it keeps running in another direction than we originally intended. For example, the whole concept of gender equality. Of course, we are all really for substantive gender equality. But what really is happening today, at least I think in Norway and in our Nordic countries, is that we are not talking about substantive changes. We are not talking about substantive gender equality. We are happy as long as there are equal numbers of men and equal numbers of women everywhere. And okay, now we come to shelters for battered women, which were originally shelters for battered women, but now we shall also have equal access for men who are battered. I'm not saying that that is not necessary, but that is the way we talk about gender equality. It's superficial, it's shallow, it's not substantive, and it's not looking for transformative change. And that's where we have to change our way of thinking. And we have to change our own ways of thinking first before we can change anybody else's.
There you have it.
Can I comment?
Some more comments,
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Like, I can see it in my thinking that nowadays I like to talk about women's rights. I mean, more than the gender equality, because it's more concrete. About like women's NGOs and NGOs working on these issues, I think it's great. Like, I love the fact that I heard about this Voices Against Violence. I'm totally going to look it up, for my work, and I think there are so many great things that people are doing around the world, and we should really learn from each other, because we don't have to, invent the wheel again and again. And actually, now that we're talking about Beijing and Nordic Forum in Turku 20 years ago in Finland, like, let's not wait for another 20 years. I mean, I think, like, now that we are talking here, we're talking about, like, our age and, young women and old and tired women and all these women and no, just like, we have all given our statement on that. So I think, like, we really have to do this more often, because they, at least for me personally, these 2 days have been really inspiring and really important. And I do hope to see you all, like, in, I don't know, is it too bold to say in 5 years or in 7 years or something? So let's work on this also, please. And I'm looking at you because you look
Was that the final remark?
Yes.
Shall we close?
I think they were so wise. They said so beautiful things, both of them. I don't think I have anything to add, except agree with you both. And what I really believe in is our grassroots movement, our solidarity, inspiration between us. That is what I think is the force that is needed to continue.
Yes. Yay.
And now we'll drink champagne and celebrate that Denmark has ratified the convention. Thank you.